Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. If you've been browsing real estate lately, say scrolling on your phone or watching this explainer here on YouTube, you've definitely noticed something incredibly frustrating. We really need to solve a massive real-world mystery today. Why does the exact same house, for the exact same buyer, suddenly cost hundreds of dollars more a month than it did just a few years ago? To figure this out, I want you to meet a guy named Joseph. Now, Joseph is making a really solid $85,000 a year. That's a great income, right? And he's looking at a totally realistic $400,000 house. You know the kind, maybe a slightly too small second bedroom, nothing crazy. But when he punches those numbers into his mortgage calculator, the monthly payment is a whopping $850 higher than it would have been 5 years ago. Same house, same square footage, same income. Well, Joseph is about to be quietly ruined by an invisible financial market he has probably never even looked at. And to really put this into perspective, just a 2-point jump in mortgage rates costs Joseph nearly $200,000 in extra interest over a 30-year loan. Let that sink in for a second. That is literally a second down payment or an entire 4-year college education just vanishing into thin air. It's paid out entirely to the people who own his mortgage, all because the market is just a little bit grumpier. So let's look at Section 1, the invisible money machine, and figure out who actually sets your rate. Most of us mistakenly think the Federal Reserve directly controls our mortgage. We picture them turning this giant dial in Washington labeled, "Your monthly payment." But blaming the Fed is clean, it's simple, and, well, it's entirely wrong. The actual foundation of your entire financial life is the bond market. A bond is basically just an IOU. When the government needs money, they borrow it by selling a piece of paper promising to pay you back with a little extra interest, which we call a yield. But here's the crazy secret we have to realize. The government doesn't decide that yield. Everyday market investors do. They decide exactly what it costs to borrow based entirely on how nervous they feel about getting paid back. Which brings us right to Section 2, Foundation, Toll, and Weather. To really understand how this works, we can visualize your mortgage as a massive 3-dimensional machine with 3 distinct moving parts. See, because most mortgages are sold, paid off, or refinanced within a decade, lenders don't actually base your 30-year loan on a 30-year bond. Nope. They base it on the 10-year Treasury yield. That's your foundation. Then, on top of that, they add a markup, kind of like a toll, which they call the spread. And finally, they adjust the whole shebang for the daily weather, which is really just the general level of market fear on any given day. Foundation, toll, weather. That is the entire machine. And lately, that middle part, the toll, has absolutely exploded. Historically, the gap between a super safe government bond and your mortgage rate was about 1.75%. But recently, it widened all the way toward 3%, literally hitting 1980s levels. So why did this happen? Well, there are 3 main triggers. First is prepayment risk. Basically, investors are terrified you're going to refinance if rates drop, which essentially means you're dumping them. Second, there's a really high bond market fear gauge making traders super jittery. And third, the biggest buyer with infinite cash, the Federal Reserve, simply stopped buying baskets of mortgages. The biggest buyer left the party, and so the tolls skyrocketed. Let's dive into Section 3, why the bond market shakes, and look closely at the cracks in this bedrock. So the absolutely crucial point here is understanding why the bedrock foundation of this machine, that 10-year Treasury yield, is vibrating and forcing rates up before that massive toll is even applied to Joseph's loan. Impartially looking at the raw numbers, the United States government now spends over $1 trillion a year just on the interest for its debt. Honestly, that's just to keep the lights on for what we've already borrowed. It actually surpasses the entire national defense budget. When you're adding trillions to the tab like that, the global lenders who buy this debt understandably start getting incredibly nervous. And because of this mounting anxiety, those lenders are now demanding what's called a term premium. For the last decade, this premium was basically asleep at 0. But oh man, it has woken up. It's an extra risk charge for locking up their money long-term with a government that owes so much. And every single tick upward in that term premium directly trickles down and makes Joseph's second bedroom just a little bit more expensive. This brilliantly illustrates a massive global domino effect. For decades, countries like China and Japan were massive buyers of American debt, but now they're pulling back. Japan is actually out there selling American bonds just to protect their own struggling currency. So, as these foreign buyers retreat, U.S. debt auctions run hot with way fewer enthusiastic buyers. Those buyers demand higher yields to take on the bonds, and once again, Joseph's mortgage climbs higher.
Now, seeing all this stress, we absolutely must avoid doomerism here. People hear mortgage-backed securities and they immediately panic, thinking it's 2008 all over again. But unlike 2008, where the loans themselves were secretly toxic and completely unverified, today's loans are incredibly solid. The strain we're seeing today is really just a crack in the bedrock foundation of government debt. The machine is running hot, and yeah, it's straining, but it is definitely not shattering.
And that leads us perfectly into Section 4, the golden handcuffs trap. You see, this bond market strain isn't just punishing new buyers. It's creating this totally bizarre trap for people who already own homes. Let's meet Amy, who's basically the other side of Joseph's coin. While Joseph is desperately trying to get into the housing market, Amy is completely trapped inside it. Back in 2021, she locked in a beautiful 2.9% rate. Now, she's got a great new job offer across town, but she absolutely refuses to take it. Why? Because selling her house and buying a new one at today's rates would literally double her monthly payment. She is wearing golden handcuffs.
And the crazy thing is, Amy is definitely not alone in this. Well over half of all American homeowners with a mortgage right now are sitting on rates below 4%. Because they flat out refuse to double their living costs, they simply will not list their houses. This completely freezes the natural supply of millions of potential homes right off the market. Tragically, this props prices up and squeezes our buyer Joseph even harder. It's a massive standstill.
But, life happens. These trapped homeowners still need cash for things like a new roof, or renovations, or paying college tuition. Since they refuse to trade up and lose that sweet 2.9% rate, they go and open home equity lines of credit, commonly known as HELOCs. But here is the massive catch. HELOCs use floating, short-term rates. So, ironically, in their desperate effort to dodge today's high rates, they end up exposing a slice of their debt to the exact chaotic rate environment they were trying to escape in the first place.
Okay, so let's get ruthlessly practical in Section 5, how to navigate the market and figure out how to survive this machine.
First things first, we need a little historical perspective. It's totally true that today's 6.5% rates feel incredibly punishing, especially compared to the 3% fever dream we had in 2021. But remember, back in the early 1980s, just to kill off feral inflation, rates were cranked all the way up. Your grandparents likely faced mortgage rates over 18%. So the bond market has definitely been this grumpy before, and you know what? The world kept turning. Looking ahead, we're basically staring at three potential paths. The optimistic path sees rates slowly easing down into the high fives. Then there's the grim path, which sees deficit fears absolutely exploding and pushing rates to 9 or maybe even 10%. But honestly, the most likely path is what we call the muddle. This is where rates stubbornly bounce around that 6 to 7% band for years. The market will slowly thaw, but only as life forces people to move and wages eventually rise enough to make housing feel affordable again. So, how do you actually play this? Well, the old wisdom really does ring true. Date the rate, marry the house. If you find a house you can genuinely afford at today's rates, waiting around for rates to drop is a terrible gamble. The cruel, unspoken secret is that the exact moment rates drop, all those sidelined buyers like Joseph are going to flood the market all at once. They'll start bidding against each other and they'll drive the home price right back out of your reach. You see, you can always renegotiate your interest rate down the line, but you can never, ever change the purchase price. That is exactly why you have to know your refinance trigger well in advance. As a general rule of thumb, if rates drop 3/4 of a point to a full point, the math usually works out to offset your closing costs. When that window opens, you've got to pull the trigger without any romantic hesitation, because trust me, that window always shuts. And when it actually comes to choosing your loan, you really need to understand what it is you're buying. A fixed-rate mortgage isn't just a loan, it is literally insurance. It guarantees your payment stays flat no matter what Japan does or what the term premium does. An adjustable-rate mortgage or an ARM, sure, it starts out cheaper, but it resets. And when it does, you're essentially inviting the absolute chaos of the global bond market directly into your monthly budget. Finally, look, if you are lying awake at 2 a.m., running a mortgage calculator over and over, just praying the numbers will magically change, I really need you to hear this loud and clear. You are not failing. An invisible global system of yields and nervous lenders completely repriced the single biggest purchase of your life without your permission. The math genuinely changed underneath you. Because at the end of the day, there is absolutely no trophy for being house poor. There's no special award for eating cereal for dinner every night just to hit some milestone on someone else's schedule.
The goal here isn't just to own property. The real goal is to be free. And perhaps the single most powerful move you can make when looking at a rigged, invisible machine is just calmly declining to play until the odds actually serve your freedom. So keep a close eye on the machine, but I'll leave you with this. What does financial freedom actually look like for you today?